Welcome to this week's episode. I'm Paula Williams.
I'm John Williams.
And we are ABCI, and ABCI's mission is
to help all you ladies and gentlemen out there in the aviation world sell more of your products and services.
Absolutely. Now, one of the interesting things about aviation and about some of the folks that we work with in aviation is that a lot of the companies that we work with or that we consult with are startups or side hustles of people who are involved with aviation that want to start a startup or a side hustle. And I think aviation lends itself really well to startups and side hustles because there are smart people in this industry. Small businesses are much needed because there are so many weird little niches of service and products that are needed.
Well, but we help these folks grow into small to medium and sometimes larger.
Right. A lot of the businesses in aviation that have become household names started in somebody's garage or at somebody's kitchen table. And, so that's like a noble tradition in the United States. And a lot of industries in aviation is no exception, right?
Exactly.
All right. So today, speaking of startups and side hustles, and a lot of folks in the last year or two have been kind of thinking either they have some time on their hands because they've been furloughed potentially, or maybe they don't want to go back to work after having a taste of freedom or whatever. There's lots of things, lots of reasons that people are kind of interested in startups and side hustles right now.
Yep.
Besides the fact that it's always good to diversify your income and have a little bit of control over your personal life and revenues and everything else. So there's lots and lots of reasons that have come up more in the last year than...
Yeah, well, there's I'm going to say a right, but there's a better way to do it, and there's a lesser way to do it.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So today we're going to talk about some of John and my adventures in startups and side hustles. So I'm going to start with the simplest version that was barely even a company. This is when I was 16. I had just learned to drive, and my dad had some friends that had horses and big properties and dogs and all kinds of things and houses and stuff, and they wanted somebody to come a couple times while they were out of town and take care of their dogs and horses and, maybe clean their house and other things like that. So I kind of built up this side hustle, scooping poop. It was terribly glamorous, and cleaning toilets and the whole 9 yards. But the really cool part was that I got to play with dogs and play with horses, and I got paid for it. So for a 16-year-old, this was just total heaven, especially when my other job, or my regular job, was as a waitress at a Denny's. So this was just so much more fun and so much more money. There really wasn't a whole lot to this business because I think my dad set up an LLC potentially. I don't remember all of the details. This was a million years ago and things were simpler. And I think we bought some kind of insurance or a bond or something along those lines so that people would feel comfortable with me having the keys to their $1 million house, right? Or multi-million-dollar house.
So are those two of the dogs you sat with?
No, I don't have any pictures.
So you didn't buy photos. So because I was wondering if they look like Magnum PI's dogs.
Exactly. I've got to be Higgins. And one family actually did have a couple of Dobermans, and I love Dobermans. They're actually really, really cool dogs, and they were always just so happy to see me, and we would play all afternoon, and then I'd take the horses out and, just make sure that they got some human interaction and got to hang out with a human for a while so that they wouldn't be completely feral when their owners got back. And, just cleaned them up, cleaned up their enclosures and areas and everything else, cut their nails, brushed everybody, made sure everybody was having a good day. In some cases they wanted their house cleaned, in some cases they had a maid or somebody that took care of that, so I didn't have to do that. But I made a few $100 for a couple of weeks of work, and I just drop by a couple times a week and play with the animals, what could be better than that, right? So that was a really fantastic side hustle for me at the time. And one of the things that it has in common with a lot of the aviation side hustles that we're seeing now, there was nothing aviation about this, but it was a luxury market. These were high net worth people. It was high value property. There was a lot of trust involved, and I was 16 at the time, but these were dogs and horses that I knew because we hung out with their families and everything. So they would just give me a tour of the house and say, this is what we want done, between now and when we get back. And, we want the yard cleaned up 2 or 3 times a week. We want the barn cleaned up 2 or 3 times a week. Everything else is taken care of, or not, or whatever I needed to do. And that would be it. So, what was great about this, and I'm going to go over the do's and don'ts looking back on it as a smarter person than I was then. What did I do right and what should I have done better? So what I did right is that I would write a checklist. While I was going through the house with these people, I would write a checklist of what they wanted done. A very detailed checklist, and then I had them initial it and say, yes, that is everything we want you to do. And I would ask them a lot of questions about, well, do you want me to do this? Do you want me to do that? Where is the supplies for this? All of those kinds of things. Where do you want me to put the garbage? All of that stuff. And took very detailed notes and would check everything off as I did it. And then I would leave them very detailed reports. Every time I dropped by the house, I'd leave them a master report kind of at the end, an executive summary, saying this is what I did on Tuesday and Thursday. I took the dogs out. We played for an hour and a half, played with the horses for an hour and a half, great day for me. I cleaned the house, that wasn't quite so great, but hey, and just would basically do a very detailed report about what I saw, what was going on, and so forth. And I totally overkilled every job, and I always made sure that I left cookies for the day that they would get home. So they'd come in the door, there would be a note from me saying, welcome home, and, have a plate of cookies and their entire report about what was going on. So that was what I did well, I think. At least they seemed to enjoy it, and, I got asked back a number of times to the same houses. What I did not do well is that I didn't market the service at all. I had a little logo, and I had a dot matrix printer, and I would print out my little forms and things on this dot matrix printer, but nobody ever saw my logo other than these 5 families I was working with, right? So I did no marketing. I didn't even ask for referrals. It didn't occur to me to say who else in your neighborhood is going on vacation that needs some help, I did no sales beyond our personal family and friends, and that's it. So that was all there was to it. It was barely even a business, but it gave me a taste for, I like this so much better than my actual job, which was being a waitress at a Denny's, which, somebody's always looking over your shoulder. They're not trusting you with their multi-million-dollar home. They're not giving you a lot of credit for what you do. They're not giving you a lot of appreciation for what you do. So, that's really where I kind of got a taste for running my own business. And ever since then, I've been looking for a way to create a side hustle or a business. And then 13 years ago, we started ABCI. Mm-hmm. So that is my story. Now we're going to talk about John's, and he can tell you what he did, and we'll talk about the good and bad with that.
Well, when I was 16, I was in New Orleans, and junior achievement was the extent of my business activities. Mm-hmm. Fast forward a bunch of years, I have gone to IBM schools to the extent that various companies have paid around $500,000 for my education in IBM world, mainframes. So, then I chanced upon a conversation, and some folks in DoD and out encouraged me to start my own company. I said, but I don't know how to do this. Mm-hmm. And said, well, you'll figure it out. And so I did. I put it together, and then they offered me a contract. And now, since I didn't have a marketing person, I didn't have an accountant, I didn't have an attorney, I was the guy for all that stuff, plus I had to do the work. But I didn't know any of that stuff. So I took the contract on a Friday afternoon, and I took the day off, and I went back to the house, and I didn't go to sleep for the whole weekend reading the contract. So I go in Monday morning, and they signed it, I signed it, and after I signed it, they said, "You realize, of course." And I said, "Oh man,
what did
I miss?" Jeez, I mean, And I said, "This is the first year of a multi-year contract." I said, "Oh yes, I knew that." I didn't know that. I missed that part. It was a 5-year contract, 1 year income. So great. Mm-hmm. And what I had to do was maintain specific software packages on 7 geographically different mainframes for DoD. And I thought, okay, I can do this. And I did. It meant a lot of travel expenses, reports, plus actually doing the work. And I did all that. And the next year they refunded, and it was great. And see, one of the reasons I did that was because working for a job, they don't really pay you what you're worth. And when you work yourself, you set your own prices. Mm-hmm. Well, you have to, as a contractor or a consultant, set your price higher because you got to pay for all the stuff that the current company would have been paying for you. Okay. Plus, you got to give yourself a raise. Mm-hmm. And plus, in my case, I had travel expenses, so, the number was way up there, and I didn't expect them to go for it, but they did. But as it turned out, at the end of the year, I probably made a 10 to 15% raise over what I'd had before, so it wasn't all that much because of all the stuff that has to come out for insurance, hospitals, all that stuff. And that was an education. Mm-hmm. And I did well. Then I set up automated reports of the house. I programmed my computer to go out and actually interact with each one of these 7 mainframes, download stuff, format it, and print it out. And then I gave them reports weekly.
Cool.
And, then I would travel with these guys because there wasn't that thing as Zoom or any of the other things. And remote access, they sort of had it, but the clearance required to have that was too high.
So this was the 80s, 90s?
This was, 80, 79, 80, somewhere in there.
Oh my gosh. So, way before there was any of this. I mean, they barely had VPNs then, right?
Yeah, and see, I jumped in with both feet because mm-hmm. I was the breadwinner, mm-hmm. and now I started my own business, and I'm still the breadwinner, mm-hmm. right? So that was quite an interesting thing. So it worked for 3 years. Then can they wait, right, till the end of the year to tell you they're going to refund or not? At the end of the 3rd year, well, we're not going to refund this project anymore. Our funding got changed. The government is. Mm. They still needed somebody to do it, but they were going to have to take it in-house and figure that out. So then I had to get a job because I didn't do any marketing.
Okay, so that kind of leads us to the pros and cons of your checklist is probably different than mine, but what did you do well that you would do again, and what do you think you should have done differently looking back on it?
At the end of the 1st year, I wanted to hire some people.
Okay.
But I wasn't making enough, and the process to get a contract amended with DoD, mm-hmm. painful. Mm. And I didn't want to go through that, so I said, well, I'll just do it. So I knew then that I had a problem, and I couldn't afford to. These people that do that sort of thing back then were expensive.
Yeah.
As they are today. So I missed that part. I didn't do any marketing, and I did various and sundry other things for the government just because I was there and I knew what to do. Mm-hmm. And I talked to a few other consultants there, and they were having trouble with some other software. I said, well, try this. And they said, and they did, and it worked. He said, is there a PARM for that? And I said, listen. I said, I've been to all these IBM schools. I know how they write, so I know some of the back doors in software. My knowledge is way old, so it doesn't matter anymore. And yeah, it works.
Cool.
So marketing was the thing I didn't do.
You had one client, and no matter how happy that client was.
That's right. When they decided not to refund, they weren't unhappy with me.
Yeah. They
didn't get the money.
Made a different decision.
From the appropriation to fund it anymore.
Yeah, and that's not in your control. So
nope.
You were done.
I was done.
All right.
So I got a job.
Yeah. So yeah, I think there are some commonalities there, and some of the things that we learned from our experience doing this and other startups. There have been a couple of others since high school for me, and probably since that for you.
Oh yeah, I started a couple more after that, but I still missed the marketing piece. Somehow I just didn't understand that.
Yeah, I think there is a myth out there in the world that the only thing you have to worry about when you're doing a startup is providing a really good product or service, and if you provide a good enough product or service, that business will happen kind of magically.
Yeah, it's the old adage, that build a better mousetrap and people will beat a path to your door, only if they know about it.
Yeah, that's true.
If they don't know about it, which is marketing, then they're not going to come knock on your door and want to buy it.
Exactly, right. So, and I think a lot of people, especially if you're coming from academia, if you're coming from the industry, if you're coming from someplace where you've always gotten a paycheck and somebody's always covered your overhead, you're sometimes surprised at some of these little bits and pieces that can kill you if you don't pay attention to them. So what we've done with our company, with ABCI, is we've put together a startup bundle of services that we wish that we had in the different startups that we put together over the years. So this would have saved us from some of the pitfalls that we just fell into over the years, because we didn't do marketing. We didn't know any of these things. And, these are the things that we learned as I went into sales and marketing later in life. And I worked in marketing with Wells Fargo for a number of years. And that was very enlightening. And then we also did several seminars and books and other things. We're kind of self-taught, other than the GKIC world, the Perry Marshalls of the world, the Dan Kennedys of the world, a lot of the great thinkers, I would say, of the 90s and 2000s. And we're still doing our book club, and we're still doing 3 or 4 different seminars a year about sales and marketing, and we always incorporate those things into what we know about the aviation industry.
And I've been to more sales schools than you can shake a stick at over since I left that company, but I've not learned anything about marketing up until I met her. So, I mean, even in business school, they go through all this marketing stuff, but they assume you got a budget of Coca-Cola, and we don't, and most of you guys don't.
Right. A startup usually has to be super careful with their money. And, so that's kind of where we came from with this startup bundle, is how can we use their resources the most carefully and invest the most sweat equity on your end, so that we're doing a collaboration of things that you can do to help build your sales and marketing system as you're building your business, so that you will always have enough customers, so that you'll always have revenue, so that you can continue your business and be successful and not die like we did, right?
Yep.
Okay. So we'll go into more detail about what's included in this bundle, but it's basically everything that we wish that we had. And it does take an investment on your part of money and of time in order to be authentic and in order to be cost effective. We have you do an awful lot of the work, and that works out really, really well, because you are your brand if you're a startup. In a lot of cases, people trust you because of their experience with you or because of what they see about you, and you become the face behind the brand. And all of the really, really good small brands that we've ever worked with has at least one person in the company that is willing and able, usually one of the founders, to be the rock star and the spokesperson of that company, and willing and able to put themselves out there and really represent themselves as that company and build that credibility for that company. So we'll go into more detail about that. Next week, we're going to talk about different ideas for startups and side hustles that you could start tomorrow, depending on your resources, your skills, your proclivities, your whatever, right?
Exactly.
All right. Okay. So thanks for joining us.
Go sell more stuff.
The industry needs the business.
Yes, they do. We all do.
Right, and the industry needs small companies starting up all the time with great ideas. So we're looking forward to working with you.
Have a great day. Stay healthy and happy.